You pretty well need to love video games and love the skills associated with it. Before the internet, before CD-ROM drives, before mobile phones.
Welcome to the Come Up Starter Kit, guys. This show is all about taking your career from 0 to 100 real quick. If you are lost, confused, or just plain stuck, I'm here to help. Now, who am I? I'm Shankar Pillai, your soon-to-be favourite career coach. With over 7 years experience in the recruitment game, there's nothing I haven't seen, and I help people just like you land that dream job. In each episode, we'll speak to one of my friends who's done something a little bit different in their career. We'll go along the journey and understand what they've done that's made them so successful. Along the way, I'll give you tips and tricks to help you with your own very come up. Let's get it. Welcome to the Come Up Starter Kit, guys. My name is Shankar and I have a very special guest with me today, Daniel Visser, who is the founder and creator of Wicked Witch Software. He has created games such as AFL 2 and the Ages of Empire 2, DE. Thank you so much, Daniel, for jumping on board.
No worries, Shankar. Nice to be here. Good to be talking to you.
Wonderful. Now, Daniel, if you could give the audience a quick summary of who you are, that would be great.
Sure, that's a big question, but I'll do my best. So I started making video games when I was about 6 years old, when my parents gave me a Commodore 64 for Christmas, and I basically just fell in love with video games back then. Space Invaders, Pac-Man, that was kind of games we were playing. Before long, I started to just tinker around with the computer and taught myself programming in the language BASIC, and I started to make my own games before the age of 10. Then through primary school and high school, I continued to just make my own games and tried to sell them as shareware and things like that. Back in the day when, I should remind you, that was before the internet, before CD-ROM drives, before mobile phones, and information was kind of hard to come by. After that, I went to college at Swinburne for a couple of years, studied computer programming. It was mainly business programming because they were the only courses available at the time. And then I got a job working at a Melbourne studio, making games on the Game Boy, the black and white Game Boy originally. Worked there for a few years, and then I went to Melbourne House, which was a large studio here in Melbourne that had been around for a long time. As a programmer and then a lead programmer. Eventually, I went back to Taurus actually as a producer and lead programmer for a few years. And then we started working for a company out of the UK. And that was kind of how Wicked Witch got started, just out of my study and out of my garage, making games for a company overseas. And from then, I've just been lucky to be surrounded by good friends and like-minded people, and we've been making games as Wicked Witch ever since.
Okay, wonderful. And what was your motivation for starting Wicked Witch Software?
So originally it was kind of to be in control of our own destiny, to kind of not have a boss, I suppose, at the start, to make games that we wanted to make, and create our own original ideas, and to basically kind of live the indie dream.
Okay. And for people that might not know what Wicked Witch Software is, how would you describe that?
So we are a game developer. We make all kinds of games in all kinds of genres. Most of our work is in console sports and free-to-play mobile games.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys, what we're going to do in the next session is sit down with Daniel and pick his brains all around his career. All right, Daniel, so for people that may be interested in becoming a game developer but wanting to know the life cycle and process of creating a game, what does that look like?
All right, look, it varies from project to project, but if I was to talk about the full typical development cycle of making a game from start to finish, first we get the brief on what the game roughly is, who it's targeted for, what genre it is, and what the characters are. We then go into pre-production, where we do a design and we work out all the features and how they're going to work. We do concepts of all the characters and the worlds and the functions of how it's going to work. We then go into a project planning stage where we will estimate how long each one of those activities will take, what the team looks like, what they're going to be doing, and we kind of plot that out in a Gantt chart, which turns into a project plan. And then we're into production. First we start building the initial worlds and assets, creating the characters, animating them, and doing the code, making the characters move, making the worlds load up. we have milestones along that way. Often there's what we call a prototype or a first playable, where there's initially, a character running around in a world, if that's the kind of game it is. And then we move through the functionality. Then you can run and jump. Then you can shoot if it's a shooting game. We eventually work to what we call an alpha milestone, which is when we've pretty well got all the content in place and you can play from the game start to finish. There might be a few bits missing and a bunch of bugs present, no doubt. We then kind of iterate and make sure the game is fun to play. We probably test it on some people during that process as well, until we get to a beta. Beta milestone means that the game is pretty well complete, and now we're going into bug testing. So we fix the bugs and we test it thoroughly and make tweaks and adjustments along the way. And then we go into what we call Gold Master, or getting what we call a release candidate ready. So we then submit it to Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo, and they do a thing called a technical requirements checklist, which make sure that the controllers work and you can tab between, and what happens when you lose internet connection. Make sure all those things are right. Then it gets submitted, certified, ready for release. After that, we go into either live ops, where we will continue to support the game, or there might be a patch or an update after that. It used to be that it kind of just went in a disc and went on the shelf and you were done, but these days games kind of have a life of their own and they continue on.
How long does it take to create a game?
It depends on the game. If it's a small mobile game, it might be as short as a few months, but generally speaking, kind of a mid-range console game will take anywhere between 12 to 24 months. And then a huge RPG or detailed game with lots of story and voice acting and lots of assets like that, that's on multiple platforms, could be 2, 3, 4 years sometimes.
Yeah, right, okay. And what is the hardest aspect when creating a game?
Hardest aspect is probably managing your vision for the game, and as great as you want to do it, and kind of the trade-offs with the cost and the time restraints that we have on us.
And for people that want to get into gaming, what are the programming languages that they need to know?
Sure. There's a bunch of skills that are required when making a video game. Broadly speaking, there's the programming, and they're doing the coding. They're writing in languages such as C++ or C#, maybe a bit of assembler, maybe a bit of Python scripting as well. Then there's the art side, which is equally as important. There's 2D artwork, concept work, 3D modeling, animating, and special effects. There's other roles like design, which is building levels and placing enemies and placing props and shrubs and things like that. There's writing, narrative writing, where we kind of have like a script that gets written for characters, NPCs to talk to you and give you your quests and give you your challenges. QA, quality assurance, is a big part of it as well, and that's basically the testing of the games, from gameplay testing through to making sure the thing doesn't break, through to the technical requirements that I've mentioned. And of course there's a bunch of production staff and admin around just project management and coordinating it as well, to name a few.
Yeah, right. If people are interested in either sides, whether it be on the art side or the actual development side, what are sort of the skills that you look for in individuals? Sure.
It's traditional skills for the most part. So programming is like a computer science degree or a game-specific programming qualification. You'll be programming in those languages in C++ and C#. It's pretty well core programming. There's a whole heap besides it. There's AI, there's networking, there's a whole field in amongst that. But generally it's programming is the umbrella it sits under.
Okay.
Artwork as well, multiple fields, whether it's 2D, doing UI design and user experience kind of stuff, or concept work in traditional, what we're drawing, basically. Yeah. And then it gets more technical from there. 3D modeling, building environments, building materials and textures, and special effects, particle effects, making fires, making rain, things like that. On the quality assurance side, on the testing side, you need to have good problem-solving skills, good analytical skills where you can go step by step and kind of, we have a bit of a format where you have to say how I made the bug, can I reproduce it, this is how you make it, this is what happens, this is what I suggest you do to fix it. Sound production, sometimes there's original music or scoring that we do. We do Foley, sound and audio effects that we build up as well. Writing, project management, there's a lot of different roles that go into it.
Okay, so for a typical day for someone that was working for you, what would a day look like?
Sure, it depends on where the project is in production. Early on is probably one of the more fun parts of the process, where you're kind of designing and brainstorming and coming up with ideas and coming up with cool characters or monsters or enemies and coming up with exciting plot lines and things like that. We then go into project planning. So again, it's a very collaborative thing. Everyone would come in on day to day and start estimating, I think it would take this long to build a character, it would take this long to build a weapon, and how many of those are we going to have? We kind of, roughly size up the project and how long it's going to take. And then in production, the day to day, if you're a programmer, you come to work, you've got your programming tasks, you might be working on bullets, shooting for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to write that system. If you're an artist or an animator, you might be animating main character, so you're doing the jump, the next day you're doing a run, the next day you're doing somebody dying or respawning. And then when we get towards the end, an average day probably looks like checking over your work, seeing if there are any mistakes, making tweaks, making changes, and then trying that again. Okay,
and how important is teamwork in this organisation, or even if you want to work in gaming?
Yeah, good question, Shankar. Teamwork is paramount. Like, it's a collaborative exercise with multi-disciplines. You've got programmers talking to artists, working with production, working with QA and testing. That's why we have a big open office here with no walls. We're all kind of in a big room, separated into teams, and everyone's communicating every day. We have usually a daily stand-up call where we have a bit of a huddle at the start of the day, and we kind of work out what we're going to be doing, what we want to achieve for the day. Every 2 weeks, roughly, we do what we call some sprint planning, where we work out what the next chunk of work's going to be, and we all talk about what we think we can achieve in that. At the end of those 2 weeks, we do a presentation and we show the team what we got done, and then we plan the next sprint.
And do you guys work in an agile environment here?
We do embrace Agile methodology. Good question again. It's actually a trade-off between what they call waterfall, planning the project out with milestones. But in amongst that, there's Agile, where things absolutely have to move. Some things that look good on paper, on the design, or even in the prototype that looked good and were fun, there are problems and it doesn't quite work, or something's just not really feeling right about it, and we need the flexibility to be able to change that. And conversely, other things that we didn't really plan on, that all of a sudden are really fun or we think are really cool, and we're like, oh, that's pretty awesome, let's do more of that. And so we do change it in amongst the greater goal.
Okay, and if people were interested in becoming a gaming developer, especially now with technology always changing, what are the leading technologies that you advise people to learn?
All right, for programming, it's learning C++ on C#. There are some third-party engines that we do use as well, such as Unreal Engine. We occasionally use a Unity engine as well, depending on the project. On the art side, it's traditional drawing, Photoshop, 3D Studio Max, and Maya. These are kind of software applications you want to learn, as well as the game making process. There's a lot to be said for trying it. Make your own project, make your own demo, collaborate with some friends. These are the things that go a long way into giving you the skills you'll need to develop video games.
And what about the soft skills, whether it be communication skills? What are the important skills around that?
Good question. That is just as important, I would say, as those hard skills. Number one is, really communication. Good communication is absolutely paramount. Everything is done more or less in a team environment. You're always collaborating between these disciplines: programming, art, sound. All of those things need to come together. It's important also just to be nice, just to be friendly. Be polite, respectful kind of environment. That's something we really value here at Wicked Witch, because making games is difficult. It's hard. There are lots of problems to overcome, and there can be pressures with external forces on deadlines and things like that. So being solution oriented helps a lot. Coming up with solutions instead of just getting bogged down in the problems. We often say, don't tell us why it can't be done, tell us what we can do to overcome that obstacle or that problem. So a positive kind of mindset and mental attitude really helps. And then as well as good old-fashioned hard work and collaboration. Listen to your teammates. Understand what they need and offer to help as much as you can. We often say there's no job too big or too small when it comes to making video games, because there's millions of things to do, teamwork is a big part of it.
For people that have just finished uni and looking to break into the industry, what advice would you give them?
I just started doing it on my own. I just started making my own games, man. I was just like little demos, little programs that I wanted to make. Same as artwork, drawing some pictures, writing stories, all of those things. Building up your folio and your resume with the practical examples of what you've done goes a long way, because that's what we look for when we interview people from all ranges. If they're new and trying to get into the industry, we try and see, what you've done, how you've tried to teach yourself, what qualifications you've got. All those things kind of help when we take in new people.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that. What we are going to do in the next segment is pick Daniel's brain around the top 3 tips if you are looking to be a game developer.
Hello again. I'm here to give you a few pro tips about how to get into the video games industry. Number one, the first thing you're going to need is passion. You pretty well need to love video games and love the skills associated with it. Whether it's programming or it's artwork or it's design or it's sound or it's writing, the more passionate you are and the more you love it, that's going to go a long way into seeing you through. Number 2 is education. While it's not strictly required and you can teach yourself, we strongly recommend that you do a course or get a degree. For programming, it's things like computer science degree, where you will study languages like C++ and C#, object-oriented programming and underlying principles on basically how computers work and how you make video game programs. Artwork, there are courses like fine arts, design and relevant industry, university or TAFE courses, where you'll learn skills like using Photoshop, 3D Studio Max, using Maya, Blender, and other programs that are commonly used in the industry. Number 3, I would say, is good old-fashioned hard work and dedication. The more you can do in this area, the better. Whether that's getting together with your mates and working on projects, building up your folio, writing code, doing demos, all of those things go a long way into showing us how dedicated you are to go above and beyond. Because making video games, it can be hard. It's a long, slow process where you build it up over time, working in a team environment with lots of things to consider and lots of things to try, fail, and redo. That's just the way it goes. So the more you can do to show hard work and dedication helps a lot. Hopefully these few things have been helpful, and good luck getting into the industry.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Come Up Starter Kit. I had a lot of fun here at Wicked Witch Software. On the next episode, we'll be talking all things cybersecurity.